Have you ever felt like the inside of your head just won't shut up and you simply can't silence it? Now take that discomfort and multiply it by 1,000,000. What if that sound wasn't just a whisper, but a bomb exploding inside your mind? History records a man who lived through this, not just as a moment of anxiety, but as the most violent psychotic break ever recorded. In 1907, Germany, an electrical engineer named August Natterer is on his lunch break when suddenly he hears a sound, not from the outside, but from the depths of his own skull. It was as if someone had set up a massive cinema projector right in the center of his mind and pressed play. Later, shaking, he would tell the doctors, "It only lasted 30 minutes, but in that half hour I saw more than 10,000 images." Can you imagine 10,000 frames? That is more than 5 images per second. A normal human brain doesn't even have the chance to process that. This man's name was August Natterer, and on that day, in that 30-minute hell, what he saw were not ordinary hallucinations. He saw the Creator, he saw the devil, but worst of all, he saw a terrifying figure he called the witch who created the universe. When he stood up from that lunch table, he was no longer an engineer. He had transformed into a zombie who immediately tried to take his own life. When they locked him in the asylum, the doctors stamped him with a diagnosis, schizophrenia. But Natterer claimed that what he saw was real and tried to put his experiences down on paper. Look closely at this drawing on the screen. At first glance, what do you see? Probably a creepy human silhouette with crooked teeth, right? But let me tell you a secret. When Natterer drew this, he didn't claim to be drawing a face. To him, this was just a landscape. Look again. That dull, staring eye looking at you, that is not an eye. That is a village lake drawn in perspective. That neck is actually a dirt path, and that hat consists of trees and fields. Even that black line you think is the brim of the hat is just the road to a tobacco factory in Dresden. When you look at the pieces one by one, everything seems perfectly normal. Natterer, trying to escape the chaos in his mind, simply wanted to draw the peaceful landscape of his childhood town, Ravensburg, but he couldn't escape. The problem is, no matter how hard we try, our brains struggle to see the landscape. Our eyes are locked onto the face. It's difficult, isn't it? This is exactly what happened to Natterer. Even when he looked at the most beautiful view in the world, his mind could not see reality as it was. Instead, it showed him his terrifying creator, the witch's head. But the most chilling part of this story isn't just Natterer. The most terrifying part is this: Natterer was not alone. In the early 1900s, in asylums all across Europe, hundreds of patients who had never met each other started drawing similar things at the exact same time, as if they were all listening to a secret frequency. So, what did the doctors do? You'll be surprised. The doctors didn't understand these drawings, and because they didn't understand, they threw them in the trash, labeling them madman's nonsense. Except for one man. That one man was a young psychiatrist named Hans Prinzhorn, but he wasn't just a shrink. He was also an art historian, and this dual identity changed the way he looked at madness forever. He believed this. We, the so-called normal people, are so polluted by society that we cannot see the real world. Think about it. When creating art, we hold ourselves back with thoughts like, will people like this? Should I add a detail here so critics can decode my secret? I must show a social problem to the public. In reality, even those great genius artists, they were part of the game too. They were limited by their education, their culture, and the point human civilization had reached. They were only as free as the length of their chains, because this is human nature. We have to accept this. No matter how free we try to be, stepping outside the civilization we exist in is nearly impossible, but not completely impossible. According to Prinzhorn, the only ones who could transcend the real world were those who had fallen out of it. The insane. A man in an asylum has no concern about selling his work to a gallery or getting applause. He doesn't care about moving civilization forward, being understood, being validated. None of it matters. That man was painting because he had to. The chaos inside him was so great he simply had to vomit it onto the paper. So when Prinzhorn looked at these men, he didn't see patients. He saw unpolluted humans. This, he said, this is the only true art that human civilization hasn't corrupted. To understand the difference, look at the artists we think are crazy. Take Vincent van Gogh. Ear-cutting, delusions, a miserable life. We put him in the same category as Prinzhorn's patients, right? Actually, he was just like us. In his letters to his brother, while painting those yellows, those swirling skies, he would explain his technique, his color theories, and what other painters were doing at great length. Do you notice it? In these letters, Van Gogh is actually defending himself. He's trying to say, I am not a madman drawing randomly. I know what I'm doing. There's logic to this. Meaning, Van Gogh wanted to be understood. Van Gogh wanted to be loved. But for a mental patient, these things have no value. They draw only and only to find relief, to survive. What about Salvador Dali, the king of surrealism? Long-legged elephants, melting clocks. We think he lost his mind too. Was he not crazy? To answer that, remember Dali's famous quote, "The only difference between me and a madman is that I am not mad." Yes, he wasn't. Dali was a genius who used madness merely as a source of inspiration. He was a normal guy who could wake up in the morning, use his techniques to say, let me have some hallucinations today, and by evening, put on his suit and count his money. So why did he paint? His motivation was fear. Dali was an anxious man. He was terrified of sexuality, of his father, and his biggest fear was going insane. If he were a mental patient, he would have succumbed to these fears, had a crisis, and vanished. But Dali didn't succumb. He transformed this terrifying energy into something society could understand and applaud. Art. So, he wanted to be understood too. But Prinzhorn realized that the art in the asylum was silent. It told no story, it had no purpose, and that was the raw gold. In the early 1920s, Prinzhorn wrote a letter to asylums across Germany. His message was simple: send me everything your patients make. Drawings, sculptures, even those weird totems they make out of chewed bread. I want it all. The doctors were confused. Why does he want this trash? They asked. But they sent it. Boxes of it. Sacks of it. When Prinzhorn opened those boxes, he didn't just find scribbles. He found 5,000 works from 450 patients, the uncensored, unfiltered Chiri state of the subconscious. When Prinzhorn published this collection in a book called Artistry of the Mentally Ill, it dropped like a bomb, not in the medical world, but in the art world. Those intellectual, pipe-smoking, surrealist painters in Paris, when they saw this book, they lost their minds. This is it, they said. What we have been trying to do for years. These patients are doing without any effort at all. Think about it. You go to the academy. You learn the golden ratio for years. You study perspective. But a man in an asylum, using his own feces in a piece of coal, reaches a reality you can never touch. The surrealist called these patients geniuses. They defined their art as art brute, raw art. Everything seems great, right? Madness finally gets the respect it deserves. I wish the story ended here, but unfortunately, history is cruel. Because in 1930s Germany, there was another group looking at this raw art. And when they looked, they didn't see genius. They saw a stain that had to be cleansed. (1907), Munich. The Nazis opened an exhibition called Degenerate Art. They took works that had international fame, including Natterer's, and gathered them in this show. But their goal wasn't just to mock these paintings. What they were doing was one of the biggest psychological manipulation experiments in history. They hung the pictures crookedly on the walls. They wrote notes underneath, products of sick minds, nature's mistake. They even slapped price tags on them. Prices a worker couldn't earn in a year, just to inject this into the public's subconscious. Look, your taxes are going to the scribbles of these madmen. But why did the Nazis hate these works so much? The answer is simple: fear. Look at what the Nazis called art: perfect bodies, strong jaws, superhumans made of steel, who never cry, never fear. Now, look to the right at Natterer's drawing. There is fear, there is fragmentation, there is pain. Meaning, there is the truth of being human. Fascism is terrified of seeing and showing man's struggle with pain and life, because it doesn't fit their idea of an eternal and strong state. They loved marble statues for a reason. Because marble doesn't get sick, marble doesn't age, Marble doesn't go mad. They wanted to turn humans into living statues. The result was the most systematic murder in modern history. Action T4. The Nazis didn't just burn the paintings. They took the hands that drew them and the brains that directed those hands and destroyed them in gas chambers. And years later, when modern science dove into those ashes to understand what Natterer experienced that day, what they found was not so much a disease, but the most terrifying secret of being human. The last thing left from Natterer is this drawing. Look at these eyes a little more carefully. Get closer, look into them. Because these eyes, they don't seem to be looking at anything, do they? Rather, they look like they're trying to withstand massive images coming at them inside the mind. No eyelashes, no eyelids. It's as if the luxury of closing his eyes was taken away from him. Natterer's note underneath summarizes everything. My eyes, at the moment of apparitions. We as a society actually recognize this stare. You've seen it in movies, or perhaps closer to home. Think of the intense manic phase of someone with bipolar disorder. They don't sleep, they don't get tired. There is an uncanny shine in their eyes. They shout, I understand everything, I solved the code of the universe. Everything is connected. What do we say from the outside? His chemistry is off. He needs his meds. He is sick. Yes, medically, we are right. But what if philosophically, we are wrong? Modern neuroscience whispers something very strange and very disturbing to us today. For years, we thought there was a disconnection or weakness in the brains of these patients. But recent scans show that in schizophrenia, in acute psychosis, there is no disconnection. Quite the opposite. There is a state called hyperconnectivity, meaning brain regions that should never speak to each other in a normal person are constantly, ceaselessly screaming at each other. When science discovered this overload, a philosopher named Aldous Huxley had summarized this with a single concept: the reducing valve. Huxley said, your brain is not a machine that produces reality. Your brain is a filter that protects you from reality and gives you an illusion. Think about it, the universe is so noisy, so colorful, so intense. If we saw every atomic vibration, every shade of color, every layer of time all at once, you wouldn't be able to wake up and brush your teeth. You couldn't go to work and you would be lost in that infinity. So, to keep us alive, our brain shuts the valve. It leaves out perhaps 99% of reality and shows us only the boring, gray, but safe 1%. And we call that 1%, the real world. But why? Why does our brain feed us this illusion? The answer lies in the cold, ruthless rule of human evolution. The brain's job is not to show us the truth. The brain has only one job: to get us to tomorrow alive. Imagine, if you met a tiger in the forest and you saw the atomic vibrations in its fur, the refraction of light, all the smells in the air meaning the whole truth, what would happen? You would freeze in awe and you would die. To survive, you need to see the tiger only as danger. You don't need anything else. So evolution blinds us into reality to keep us alive because seeing all the truth is unnecessary and useless. And useless things have no place in the human brain. So what about Natterer that day at the lunch table when he saw that the fork was not just a fork? Maybe his brain wasn't making a mistake. Maybe, just maybe, he had broken free from this survival-focused illusion that we all live in. We close the file by calling him mad, because there is no one who can look at the raw truth and survive.